On March 15th, an Iranian anti-ship ballistic missile struck the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer operating in the Red Sea as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian. The missile penetrated the ship's defensive envelope, detonated against the hull near the waterline, and caused catastrophic flooding in multiple compartments. Within 18 minutes, the commanding officer gave the order to abandon ship. 73 minutes after impact, the USS Gravely capsized and sank in international waters approximately 40 nautical miles west of the Yemeni coast. This is not a simulation. This is not a war game scenario. This happened. And the next 24 hours will determine whether the world stumbles into a conflict that no government can control and no population is prepared for. The USS Gravely was not operating alone. It was part of a multinational task force assembled to protect commercial shipping from Houthi drone and missile attacks that have disrupted Red Sea transit since the Gaza war intensified. The destroyer's mission was defensive: intercept incoming threats, escort vulnerable tankers and cargo vessels, maintain a visible presence to deter escalation. It was doing exactly that when the missile struck. The weapon that killed the Gravely was not a Houthi system. It was an Iranian-designed College-Fars anti-ship ballistic missile, a weapon specifically engineered to defeat Aegis-class defenses by traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 6 and maneuvering during its terminal descent to evade interception. The Houthis do not possess this weapon. They have drones. They have cruise missiles. They have short-range ballistic systems that Iran has supplied over the years. But the College-Fars is not in their inventory. It is operated exclusively by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, which means this was not a Houthi strike that Iran enabled. This was an Iranian strike, launched from Iranian territory, directed by Iranian commanders, against an American warship operating in international waters, under a United Nations-endorsed mission to protect civilian shipping. That changes everything. At 0400 hours Zulu time, the Pentagon released a terse statement confirming the loss of the USS Gravely and the successful evacuation of 283 crew members. 14 sailors remain unaccounted for. The statement did not identify the weapon system. It did not attribute responsibility. It did not outline next steps. What it did say, in carefully calibrated diplomatic language, is that the United States reserves the right to respond at a time and place of its choosing. That phrase, "at a time and place of its choosing," is Pentagon code for "we are deciding right now whether to start a war." The decision matrix facing Washington in the next 24 hours is unlike anything American leadership has confronted since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Because this is not a miscommunication. It is not an accidental engagement. It is not a proxy force acting beyond Tehran's control. Iran made a deliberate decision to sink an American warship. They launched the missile. They guided it to target. They watched it hit. And they have not apologized, expressed regret, or offered any explanation that would provide an off-ramp for de-escalation. What they have done is release a statement through the IRGC media channel declaring that any American military vessel operating in waters near Iranian interests will be considered a legitimate target. That is not the language of restraint. That is the language of a country that believes it can win a confrontation, or that has decided the cost of not confronting the United States is higher than the cost of war. China released a statement within 2 hours of the sinking. Beijing called for restraint from all parties and emphasized the importance of dialogue and diplomatic solutions. But the statement also included a line that every analyst in Washington is parsing word by word. China respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all nations and opposes any military action that threatens regional stability. That phrase, "opposes any military action," is directed at the United States. It is a warning. If America retaliates against Iran with strikes inside Iranian territory, China will not remain neutral. It will not stay silent. And it may not limit its response to diplomatic condemnation. Russia's response was even less ambiguous. The Russian Ministry of Defense issued a statement asserting that the sinking occurred in a context of ongoing Western military aggression in the Middle East, and that Iran has a legitimate right to defend itself against hostile forces operating near its borders. Moscow then announced that it is repositioning naval assets in the eastern Mediterranean to monitor the situation. That repositioning includes at least 2 submarines, a guided missile cruiser, and support vessels. Russia is not preparing to intervene on Iran's behalf, but it is preparing to complicate any American military operation in the region. And in a conflict where timing, logistics, and freedom of movement determine outcomes, that complication could be decisive. The European response has been fragmented. France and the United Kingdom released joint statements condemning the attack and pledging solidarity with the United States. Germany issued a separate statement calling for immediate de-escalation and urging all parties to avoid actions that could lead to broader conflict. That split between those willing to support American retaliation and those prioritizing de-escalation is a fracture that Tehran will exploit. If Washington cannot count on unanimous European backing, the political cost of military action increases. And if the political cost is too high, The credibility of American deterrence erodes. In the Gulf states, the reaction has been near silence. Saudi Arabia has not released a statement. The UAE has not commented. Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, all silent. That silence is calculated. Gulf governments do not want to be seen as endorsing an Iranian strike on an American vessel, but they also do not want to be dragged into a war between Washington and Tehran. HAT could result in missile strikes on their own territory, attacks on their oil infrastructure, and the collapse of the regional security architecture they depend on. So they are waiting, watching, and hoping that someone else makes the decision that removes them from the impossible choice between their security guarantor and their largest regional adversary. Israel has been less restrained. The Israeli defense minister released a statement within hours of the sinking calling. The attack, an act of war, and pledging that Israel stands ready to support any action necessary to hold Iran accountable. That statement was followed by reports, unconfirmed but widely circulated, that Israeli strike aircraft have been placed on heightened alert, and that target packages for Iranian military and nuclear sites have been updated and are ready for execution. If the United States decides to strike Iran, Israel will participate. And if Israel participates, Hezbollah will respond. And if Hezbollah responds from Lebanon, the Northern Front opens. And if the Northern Front opens, the probability of this remaining a limited engagement drops to near zero. The economic reaction has been immediate and severe. Brent crude surged to $132 per barrel within 6 hours of the news breaking, the largest single-day increase since the outbreak of the Ukraine war. Gold hit an all-time high. U.S. Treasury yields spiked as investors fled risk assets. Global equity markets entered freefall, with the S&P dropping 8%, the worst decline since the COVID crash. The economic signal is clear. Markets believe this escalates. They are pricing in supply disruptions, energy shocks, and the possibility of a broader conflict. It disrupts global trade routes and destabilizes the international financial system. The Strait of Hormuz has not closed. Yet. But insurance rates for tankers transiting the strait have increased by 400% in the last 12 hours. Shipping companies are rerouting or delaying sailings. And if the perception takes hold that the risk is unmanageable, the flow of 20% of the world's oil supply could halt within days. That would not just spike prices. It would create shortages, rationing, economic contraction in every energy-dependent economy. The cascading effects would reach every household, every business, every government budget. And once those effects are felt, the political pressure to end the crisis by any means necessary becomes overwhelming. Inside the White House, the debate is between three options. None of them are good. Option one is proportional retaliation. Strike the Iranian missile site that launched the attack. Destroy the radar and command infrastructure that guided it. Demonstrate that American warships cannot be sunk without consequence. The advantage of this option is that it is measured. It does not target Iranian leadership or civilian infrastructure. It creates space for Tehran to absorb the blow and step back without losing face. The disadvantage is that it may not be enough. If Iran responds to a limited strike with another attack, and if that attack succeeds, then the United States is in the position of having retaliated and still appearing weak. And weakness, in this context, is unaffordable. Option two is escalation dominance. Strike not just the launch site, but the entire Iranian coastal defense network. Hit Revolutionary Guard naval bases. Destroy missile production facilities. Degrade Iran's ability to threaten shipping or American assets for months or years. The advantage is that it sends an unmistakable message. The disadvantage is that it requires a sustained air campaign, puts American pilots at risk, and creates casualties that Iran will use to rally domestic and international support. It also increases the probability that Iran responds not with restraint, but with maximum escalation. Strikes on Saudi oil fields, missile attacks on Israel, activation of proxy forces across Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. And if that happens, the United States is committed to a regional war with no clear exit. Option three is restraint. Condemn the attack, demand accountability, pursue diplomatic channels and international sanctions. Avoid military action that could spiral into uncontrolled conflict. The advantage is that it keeps the door open for negotiation. The disadvantage is that it signals to every adversary watching that the United States will not enforce its red lines, that its warships can be sunk, that its forces can be killed, and that the response will be statements, not strikes. If that perception takes hold, American deterrence collapses, not just in the Middle East, everywhere. China recalculates the risks of a Taiwan operation. Russia recalculates the risks of further moves in Eastern Europe. North Korea recalculates the risks of provocations on the peninsula, and every ally recalculates the value of an American security guarantee. The decision is expected within 24 hours. It may come sooner. The National Security Council has been in continuous session since the sinking was confirmed. The president has spoken with key allies. Intelligence assessments are being updated in real time. And the clock is running because delay, in this situation, is its own form of decision. Every hour that passes without a response is an hour that Tehran can use to prepare for retaliation, disperse assets, harden defenses, and rally international support. Every hour that passes is an hour that the perception of American indecision solidifies, and in geopolitics, perception is often more powerful than reality. The historical parallels are grim. In 1914, the assassination of an archduke set off a chain reaction of mobilizations, ultimatums, and alliance commitments that no single leader could stop. In 1962, the discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, and it was only a combination of back-channel diplomacy and sheer luck that pulled it back. In both cases, the actors involved believed they could control the escalation, manage the crisis, find an exit before catastrophe, and in both cases, they were nearly wrong. The sinking of the USS Gravely is that kind of moment, not because any single actor wants a world war, but because the structure of the situation, the web of alliances, the economic dependencies, the domestic political pressures, the military commitments already in motion, creates a logic of escalation that is extraordinarily difficult to stop once it starts. Iran believes it cannot back down without losing credibility. The United States believes it cannot fail to respond without losing deterrence. China and Russia believe they cannot allow American military dominance to go unchallenged. Israel believes it cannot miss an opportunity to degrade Iranian capabilities. And every government is making decisions based not on what it wants to happen, but on what it fears will happen if it does nothing. The next 24 hours will reveal whether rationality prevails, whether the costs of war are weighed honestly against the costs of restraint, whether leaders can find the off-ramps that allow everyone to step back without losing face, or whether we are watching, in real time, the same miscalculations and misjudgments that have led to every major conflict in modern history. The USS Gravely is at the bottom of the Red Sea. 14 American sailors are missing, and the world is holding its breath.